according to Matthew, the 22nd chapter. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said, so they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of gospel in accordance with the truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is on this and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
This gospel is one that has fascinated theologians, political scientists, philosophers, and historians for almost 2,000 years. It is timeless, and always relevant. It is set within the context of parables about people's willingness to kill, harm, and manipulate others for their own benefit. Jesus is calling out the Pharisees and the Herodians today. He decides to put their disciples on the spot, even as they try to put him on the spot. He calls them hypocrites. He knows that they are trying to set him up. If he says that they should pay taxes to Rome, then he will alienate one group. If he says that they should not pay taxes, then he will be in trouble with the Roman government. However, Jesus ends up starting a discussion that continues to this day, or rather becoming part of a discussion that he had started long before he stepped into it. More to the point, there are at least two things happening here: the hypocrisy of powerful people and a distinct understanding of the relationship between church and state. For a long time, I know most of the preaching on this passage has been focused on hypocrisy, how it is a constant in human nature, and how we can respond to it in order to chop it down to size. However, what also stands out is how difficult it is to get a job done when there is too much self-interest on the part of some and too little concern for the truth or the common good. This passage reminds us of how confusing and messy the results can be, because we cannot cut away the looking after number one from the situation in order to focus on what is needed. We are stuck navigating the push and pull of both. It is painful at times to live with the reality that we have to settle for less than our ideal. I don't know about you, but I long for the good, of course, according to my light, the good to be set up high for all to see and follow, to look out at the world and see that which is good and beautiful to be the undisputable goal and end of all our striving. Unfortunately, that is not how life goes along. We have to settle again and again for the mundane, for the good enough. That is not inspiring, and there is no clarion call for good enough. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and render unto God the things that are God's. This is Jesus' reply when asked the fateful questioning concerning taxes. Luther talked about the two kingdoms, the spiritual kingdom and the temporal one. Historically, this has been interpreted often to say that matters of faith belong in one sphere and matters of the world belongs in another, and they seldom overlap. That is how most of us are taught about the kingdom, the two kingdoms. This separation. It is a simple rule of thumb that can be applied whenever a question comes up. Religious questions are a matter of the soul and sacraments and should remain separate from the messiness of this world. Worldly concerns have to be allowed to be addressed by worldly solutions, including the sword. But Luther was never this absolute. For example, Germany was the European country that was furthest along with its devotion to public education. As the region was ahead of the curve in developing a middle class and a merchant class, education became more important and more necessary for more people in order to continue the progress. It was already a given that education instilled in people the ability to critically think for themselves, and that allowed them to more deeply reflect on God's sanctification and promise. Here's where the printing press came out. People could actually read the scriptures for themselves. I don't think any of us can imagine just how revolutionary that was for that day. Luther argued loudly and consistently for public education to be expanded to most boys. He argued it from a religious perspective. He maintained that it would nurture people's faith and allow them to stay firmly in the true word of Scripture, and they would be less likely to be led astray. It would also benefit worldly concerns by creating more men to serve the greater good, and he argued that this was also a spiritual good. Lastly, it would allow the region to develop into a modern economic powerhouse through the widening cash and manufacturing economy. All of these concerns were framed by Luther as part of the spiritual realm, if for no other reason than that it would benefit society as a whole. The two spheres do overlap. It is not all or nothing. Trying to find a hard and fast criteria by which to assess when an overlap is called for, that's the challenge. It was in 1530, and it is still today. It is a process question. I think for our times that this is one of the most significant challenges for the church. We are the children of the civil rights movement. We are the ones who picked up the baton to carry it forward. We're also the ones who have seen life turned upside down through the never-ending pace of change and social expectation. It feels wonderful to be part of the change. It feels exhausting to see no end in sight. But it has come at a price. Even as we strive to be more inclusive, we are breaking apart. Process takes time. It is messy, and we do not all understand what is progress in the same way. and yet we keep pushing forward. That is what the gospel calls for in many, many situations. However, we do not just keep pushing our views forward until they prevail. We don't wear down others in pursuit of our vision until they throw up their hands and just give up. We also move forward with our bonds to one another. We move forward to care deeply for the fragility of one another's hearts. We have to reimagine what process is not just talking things through and planning the next step. It is also part of building and deepening relationships. It is allowing different parts of us out to share with others that they might not have known about. It is also connecting with parts of others that we never or seldom have seen. It can be a gift from God. It is done in the spirit of caring for one another and trusting in one another's basic decency. Even when we are dismayed by something, our trust and caring do not fade. This is all to say the two-kingdom theory is always a moving line. There are times when it calls for advocacy. There are times when it calls for loving those around the table and being together as brothers and sisters in Christ. And there are times that it calls for both. I have an aunt who's also my godmother, and she has always been very good to me. She tried to teach me how to play tennis when I was younger. She thought it was something that every proper young lady should know. I have no hand-eye coordination or depth perception. Moving balls and I do not get along. I was embarrassed by this, so being 13 or 12, I copped an attitude. Years later, when I was learning to play golf, I had a flashback to the tennis lessons, and I was ashamed of how I had behaved. She had been very generous with her time and effort, and what did she get in return? But she also had some negative attitudes. One night, she got upset with my uncle because he had made supper. She scolded him, telling him that he should not be cooking or in the kitchen because that was woman's work. She had a very definite set of ideas about what was a woman's place. Another time, she criticized some black actors who were on a talk show saying that they should know their place. In this case, my uncle called her out loud and clear. This one he would not let slide. Well, fast forward it many years. I am living in the Bay Area, and one of my brothers is living in San Francisco. There is a large family reunion that I am not able to go. However, two of my brothers went, the one who lives in San Francisco and the oldest one. And the oldest was sort of the black sheep of the family. He had enjoyed the 60s a little bit too much. He had since cleaned up and turned into a really good guy. But he was nervous because he was not sure how the family would respond to him. So all of my siblings called me to tell me this because it was funny. The two of them were standing and talking when my aunt stopped to talk with them. She greeted the older one and said how happy he was there. And then she added, well, you are family, and once you're family, it's for life. My brother was beginning to feel pretty good and thinking, well, this might work out. But then she turned to my other brother and said, is this your special friend? Poor lady. My brother just spluttered, no, he's my brother. She slinked away mortified. She has since commented to me that people should be able to be with whoever they want to be with, and everyone should be partnered. People should not live single. Now, mind you, I was single at the time she said this. Following the process model, staying engaged and caring across divides, you discover a richness in others that feeds the soul, even as it can leave your mouth dropping. My aunt is a walking contradiction. In some ways, I love her the more for it. Looking at these bonds through a process model does not resolve all the tensions. It does not eliminate or excuse anything. It is a reminder. It reminds us of our own views that others may think are wrong-headed, thereby giving us humility. It also reminds us that the heart speaks a language that is different than the head. My relationship with my aunt let me get a glimpse of her fragility and how much she wants to love and care for the people around her. And I can love her just for that. I brought the two kingdoms theology into the personal realm today because it is easier to look at it that way. I did not bring it into social justice or politics because that is seldom useful. Emotions run high that it can make it difficult to see the dynamics of the theology. And that moving line is always going to change that just a little, one way than the other. But I hope that this lets us see the inner dynamics and provides an opening for hearts to touch one another. After all, it is the heart and the spirit that holds us together. You are at a point now where you are considering calling a pastor. I pray that your heart may lead the way.